This is likely not the typical scene of Cuba that you're used to. That's because today I'm in a region called Vinales. Vinales is on the very, very western tip of the island of Cuba, and it is the agricultural area. So, in this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of the tour I went on to explore that area. We left Havana pretty early in the morning, and after about 2 hours on the bus, stopped to get a coffee and a bathroom break, and of course, have a look at some of the locals. These cattle were very, very photogenic and happy, as was the farmer that was taking care of them. Back on the bus we went, and then into the town of Vinales. And as you can see, it is a rural landscape, so the houses are spaced out a little bit. Some of them are very pretty and well cared for. Others are in a little bit of disrepair. And then you come upon some newly planted tobacco fields, which is really important here in the Vinales region. Once we got to the farm that we were visiting, it was really obvious just how beautiful this landscape was. The lots that they grow the crops on are small, and they're tended to by small families. They grow fruits and vegetables, coffee, and most importantly, tobacco. And that's what we came to see here today. You can see in the background those beautiful mountains. That mountain range is actually called the Sierra de los Organos, and it's made of limestone. I think this was one of the most beautiful things I saw, one of my favorite shots. This is a drying shed for tobacco. Once it's harvested, it gets hung up in these sheds so the wind can dry out the leaves. And this was me doing a little bit of a ninja walk through that drying shed. Unfortunately, there was no tobacco being dried there when I visited because they had just finished with the crop and were waiting for the new one to grow. But nonetheless, it was very beautiful, and I loved this whole sort of pastoral scene, opening up onto another tobacco field and then seeing those mountain ranges again in the background. The family that runs the farm is truly a family operation. There are 3 grown sons. This is one of them here, demonstrating to us how to roll cigars. He presented his demonstration in Spanish, in Italian, and I think maybe in French or Portuguese. I can't remember, but it was definitely not in English. But I had no trouble following along. It was pretty easy to see exactly what was happening. And he made some beautiful cigars, which of course I brought home for us to sample. This was the box that I brought home for us, handmade right there on the farm. Another nice thing about this farm is that they had little refreshments, something called warapa. And if you know what warapa is, let me know in the comments. And here is just another beautiful, beautiful landscape. Of course, the palm trees swaying in those breezes with the landscape in the background. It's interesting to note that in this area where the tobacco is grown, farmers must sell 90% of their crop to the government, since this is a socialist, somewhat communist country. But the other 10%, they are allowed to make cigars and have for their own sales and use. So that's what we were doing here. These are beautiful limestone mountains. And again, something that, you don't really see in Cuba if you go to one of the beach resorts. So I was very happy to finally visit this area, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was designated that because this valley is very rich in culture as well as in its landscapes. And one of the interesting landscapes, of course, where you have mountains, you have caves. So there are several very large and interesting caves. Back in the day, they were used by slaves who were brought to the country, and the slaves hid out in these caves. Today they are open for tours, and so we climbed up these stairs. And if you're wondering why there was a little bit of a backlog, it's because you can walk through the caves, but it was a bit of a sketchy walk. You had to duck under some of the hanging things and crawl over some of the bumps on the bottom. But it was all worth it when we got to the bottom, because once there, we got a boat ride in the cave, in the bottom of it, and our tour guide would use a little laser pointer to point out for us what the shapes were on the walls. If you've ever been to Disney and been on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it was like that, but not like that. It was very calm and soothing and drippy and quiet and a little bit cool. And when you came around some corners, you'd see some light coming in from some above holes in the mountain. This was actually a dead end, and we did a little turnabout here and then continued on with our tour. But it was really something interesting. Not recommended for those who are claustrophobic in any way, because it's a little bit of a tight squeeze through some of those landscapes. We came very, very close to the edges sometimes, but as you can see, quite beautiful. Once we left the boat and got up topside again, we did a sort of a long walk back to the entrance of the caves, which is a little bit of a tourist area. That's where some of the tour buses would park, and some of the people would stop to have a meal there at one of the restaurants. Unfortunately, it was the worst meal I had in my 8 days in Cuba, but sometimes that happens. But we can talk about the food a little bit later, because there is excellent food to be had in Cuba and in Havana particularly. And in my next video, we will talk about that. But here it was all about the landscape and about those mountains and about, that rural landscape that I really do love. And I wanted to spend a lot more time here exploring. I certainly wanted to be here at sunrise or sunset to get some of those beautiful images of the people working in the fields. They hand harvest tobacco and they pick fruits, and a lot of the transportation is done by a horse and a buggy, so it feels very old-timey, which is what I love. On our way back, we stopped at this lookout point, and at this lookout point is one of the 3 hotels that are in Vinales. This one is called Hotel Jasmine, and as you can tell, it's very vintage and very pretty, and I'm pretty sure it enjoys the most spectacular view of the Vinales Valley. I definitely wanted to stay here. There is a huge pool topside here. And then I'm just going to leave you with this absolutely gorgeous panorama shot of the Vinales Valley.